G'day Brisbane, g'day Perth, and g'day Australia. This is episode 402 of The Other Side for the fortnight commencing Friday, February 7, 2025. I'm Damien Curry. The Other Side is your analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. Our bias, we always declare it right up front, is sensible centre right. What we would call good old-fashioned, everyday, common sense Aussie values. We certainly don't expect you to agree with everything we say. And most importantly of all, we pay our own way with your voluntary support via our website, othersidetv.com.au. Drop on there and support us if you like what we're doing. Well, the ABC has caught up with the news that Australia's political landscape is changing. In this week's episode of Four Corners, they explored the reality that, like in most of the rest of the Western world, two-party uni-party systems are falling apart. And here at home, the major parties are losing traditional support, especially Labor.
We're here in the electorate of Werriwa, a seat that Labor's held for the last 90 years.
In this cost of living election, Labor has plenty to worry about. For the first time, Four Corners reveals that in 82% of seats, most households are in financial stress. Astonishingly, up from just 8% 3 years ago. That's where paychecks barely cover basic living expenses.
And that's it, folks. You don't need to know anything else about the next election. It's all to do with that. Conservative pollsters tell me that their research is showing the same thing Labor's is. Nobody gives a rat's about any other issue except the cost of living. Four Corners spoke to a social demographer from the Australian National University. Social demographer is just a fancy way of saying someone who studies social trends and the thinking of different groups within society.
Australia is at a tipping point, a social crossroads, whereby we are confronted with a grossly uncertain future. We have housing affordability, a major issue, economic insecurity, gender inequality, and a climate emergency.
Yes, well, it wouldn't be the ABC if they didn't mention gender inequality and a climate emergency. And she wouldn't be an Australian university academic if she didn't either. But the first two things she mentioned are actually right. Housing affordability and economic insecurity are the biggies. And she should have just stopped there. I do hope that the left-wing parties keep banging on about the identity politics nonsense and climate change stuff, though, because it'll only serve to cement their demise this time around. What this election is going to come down to is which party is able to best tell the story of why we are suffering economic uncertainty and cost of living pressure. And there's no ignoring immigration, even if you're the ABC.
In years past, Labor could have banked on the support of families like the Knipes.
There we go.
Mum Susie grew up in Werriwa and has stayed in the area with husband Daniel to raise their kids, Sophia and Michael. Many migrant families like hers were once rusted-on Labor voters.
My parents came out here in the 50s.
Yep.
And just the community with our family, they all moved onto the same street. You know, I had my cultural Italian roots, but then also we idolised the Australians. They had such a love for their country, for their culture.
But her fond memories of an idyllic suburban childhood have been dimmed by the frustrations of rapid population growth due to recent migration.
This is the really big growth corridor of Sydney.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the public amenities, the infrastructure has kept up with that?
No, it's not ready for it. No, and with the projections of how many more, I just don't know how it's going to work out, how they'll be able to manage this growth.
You know, when the ABC starts questioning immigration, that things must be really bad. Immigration is a massive part of the problem. Who knew that you couldn't bring 1 million new people into a country of just 27 million people in just 18 months and not have any issues arise? Everybody with half a brain knew, just not the people who seem to inhabit our government and media class these days. But it doesn't stop there. What the lovies at the ABC will never discuss are the other three huge things that are driving our cost of living through the roof and making home ownership a pipe dream for young Australian families. The cost of energy, the cost of labour, and the cost of government. Put those three monsters in a blender, whiz in a little insanely excessive immigration, and the conspiracy theorists in their mum's basement who reckon that somebody out there is actually deliberately trying to stuff up Australia, well, they don't seem to sound so crazy after all. What the hell is going on? What ties all these four things together? Excessive levels of immigration, high energy costs, high labour costs, and high government costs. Anyone? Anyone got an idea?
Bueller? 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 Bueller?
The left! The left ties excessive levels of immigration, high energy costs, high labour costs, and high government costs together. Nutjob, fantasyland, left-wing madness thinking infecting the halls of every damn government department in this country. Infantile, emotionally driven thinking that takes every popular cause of the moment and makes decisions based on immediate feelings and emotions and not logic and long-term thinking. My mate Rob McMullen would say it's the feminine aspects of our culture that have been dominant over the masculine elements for way too long. This ain't no patriarchy, baby. But I don't want to get into that because people think about gender. Alpha women are very capable of smart masculine thinking when needed, and beta males are very good at feminine thinking. And feminine thinking is needed, sometimes too. The point is that right now we are way off balance. As someone said on Twitter this week about Donald Trump, Daddy's home, kids, and he's taken off his belt. The winner of the next election will be Daddy, and that ain't elbow. Unless by some miracle the left manages to convince Australians that the cost of living pain that they're suffering is all to do with evil right-wing men. Somehow I don't think anyone's buying that old lie anymore.
What the Leader of the Opposition should be ashamed of is his performance in this parliament and the sexism he brings with it.
Yep, that old trick ain't going to work this time round, Labor friends. People know where the cost of living pain is coming from. It's the insanity of shutting down coal stations while China and India build literally dozens of them. It's the double insanity of banning nuclear power while you're shutting down those coal stations. And it's the realisation of millions of Aussies, finally, that energy underlies everything. If the cost of energy goes up, the cost of everything goes up, Einstein. I can't see how Peter Dutton could lose this upcoming election. But this is Australia. We walk amid a lot of poorly educated lefties, like the leader of the Greens, Adam Bent, who knows how to sell a lefty message or 10. It's the rich bastards eating all the pies. It's the big corporations. Just tax all the corporations more. It's the fossil fuel industry. If people buy that traditional big lie that Marxists have been pushing since Marx first spat out his intelligent-sounding but extremely dumb ideas on paper, that they can't continue to blame people for poverty that aren't responsible for poverty. And they need to understand how classical free market economies actually work. Unfortunately, it won't be Labor that gets across the line on its own. It'll be a new kind of coalition government. It'll be a Labor-Green coalition government. Here's Adam Bent at the National Press Club a few months back.
At the last election, we saw more Greens and Independents elected to the lower house. There's now a record number of members of Parliament who aren't from one of the major parties. This is a good thing. But despite that, the political class still doesn't get it. They have mistaken a lack of interest in their own political project, self-serving major party politics, as being evidence of lack of engagement in politics full stop.
He's right about that, at least. A lot of his diagnosis is right. It's just the treatment the Greens want to impose that's terrifying. Their solutions all involve the government running the economy and eliminating the free market, where you, the customers, get to vote for what you want every single day with the dollars you choose to spend or not to spend. That's what makes a liberal free market fantastic. It forces businesses and organisations to be responsive. But in Adam's world, he and his green mates will be the ones who make all those decisions for us all. I'm going to play you a decent minute-long slab of his speech right now because I want you to really listen to it and get the meaning in a way that the old media doesn't usually let us. Just listen carefully.
The major parties also hate the climate movement so much that they're throwing peaceful protesters in jail. Our coal and gas exports cause more damage to the world than any other country bar Russia. But instead of being concerned by the big corporations making billions burning up our future, They're locking up the people who are prepared to get in the way. But the climate movement still grows. There is also a growing movement fighting for control of rents to bring down the costs of housing for all. A movement fighting for mental and dental care for all. A movement fighting for free university, TAFE, and to wipe all student debt. A movement fighting for raising income support so that no one in this wealthy country of ours lives in poverty. A movement to make price gouging from the banks, supermarkets and power corporations illegal to bring down the cost of essentials for us all. A movement for publicly owned renewable energy and an end to more coal and gas. A movement for peace. A movement for equality of all. A movement for treaty and truth. It's time to reject politics as usual. It's rigged. We need a new politics which puts people first and which tackles the big problems that we face. And this isn't just a dream. Currently, the Greens hold balance of power in the Senate. This election, we will be running the biggest campaigns in Green history to win lower house seats too. There are at least 5 new seats across the country where we believe we're in with a strong chance.
The reason I wanted to play that to you is that they could win if they sell that message right. The left-wing message is a powerful message. It's emotional and it sounds so nice in parts. Emotional messages have much more power than logical, rational ones. Economics sounds cold and unfeeling at times. If the Greens manage to confuse everyone about the true causes of inflation and say it's corporate spending, corporates avoiding tax, somehow being evil, or it's the supermarket's fault. I mean, all that sounds pretty cool if you're 20 and you think money comes from Centrelink and your boss is a bit of a bitch at times and wears nicer clothes than you do. And there's partial truth to it all. Some corporations do avoid tax. Some business people are greedy bastards. So if Adam and his team can actually convince enough Aussies to believe that lie, that inflation doesn't really come from high costs of energy, labour and government spending after all, if they can sell that message, they could just pull it off and drag a crippled Labor Party over the line. And voila, we have Australia's first ever Labor-Green coalition government. Another thing worth pointing out, the Greens have literally hundreds of students and unemployed people with plenty of time on their hands to do the campaigning for them. Armies of youngsters to man those polling booths and to do political door knocking. Add to that a lot of money. The Greens are super well funded by left-wing capitalists and even right-wing capitalists trying to look nice and fuzzy with their ESG and DEI PR campaigns. They're not short of a buck, that's for sure. So folks, it ain't over yet. If you're a centre-right or right-wing Aussie, or a centrist who thinks we're leaning way too far left right now, you need to get involved big time in this election. Join a political party on the right. There's one for everybody. Open your wallets. Do something. Because if you don't, it could be a nightmare scenario after May. The other side doesn't get more than $1 billion of taxpayers' money to bring you news from a centre-right perspective like the ABC does to bring you news from a left-wing perspective. In fact, we don't get a red cent from the government. We need voluntary donors and supporters like you to keep going and growing. And we hate asking for charity, so we've done a deal with what we think is the world's best VPN, virtual private network service. It'll keep you and your family truly safe without slowing down your internet speeds, and you can watch Netflix or other streaming services using your regular accounts with them as if you're viewing from any country in the world. And you can sign up for less than $3 a month and get a whopping 83% off the normal price. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside to sign up and get more info. That's piavpn.com/otherside. You may have noticed that this week's episode of The Other Side looks a little bit different and sounds a little bit different, and that's because we've already arrived in the UK, where we're going to be covering the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, or ARC, conference, which kicks off in London on February 17.
The eternal message that's at the foundation of Western civilization is that we are each a divine locus of value. We each have a cardinal and irreplaceable role to play in the destiny of the world.
Our next episode of the main show of The Other Side will be coming to you from ARC. ARC was set up by Jordan Peterson and former Australian Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson as a way of sort of countering the influence of the World Economic Forum, an alternative freedom, liberty, conservative focused organisation to counter the big globalist one.
We need a revival, not merely of civic rights, but I have to say to you too, of a re-engagement by citizens, a stepping up to look for our civic duties, to accept them, to be virtuous citizens. We need a movement of persons who show up. This is my plea, to be engaged, to man your station.
ARC is positive and visionary. It seeks to end the depressing worldview of the technocrats and the bureaucrats and put a positive light on Western civilization and all of the great things that it's been responsible for.
There are people who believe that our history is evil, that we do not deserve to be great, we do not deserve to be powerful, that we must be punished for the sins of our ancestors. To them, our past is abominable, our present must be spent apologizing, and our future is managed decline.
And that begs a question, which is, how should we move into the future? How should we conceptualize the future?
So we'll be taking our cameras to ARC in London next week and bringing you episode 403 of The Other Side from ARC on February 21. Make sure to join us then. Well, Donald Trump has really turned geopolitics on its head in the past week. He had his first meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and then made this rather startling announcement in the news conference immediately afterwards.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. I'm hopeful that this ceasefire could be the beginning of a larger and more enduring peace that will end the bloodshed and killing once and for all. With the same goal in mind, my administration has been moving quickly to restore trust in the alliance and rebuild American strength throughout the region. And we've really done that. We're a respected nation again.
Now, foreign policy experts immediately slammed Trump's plan as lunacy, saying the idea of making people leave their homeland is ethnic cleansing legally and technically, and mocking the idea that the United States could own Gaza somehow. The Saudis, Egypt and Jordan immediately said there's no way that they're taking more Palestinians in, and Hamas remains armed and dangerous. They aren't going to be giving up Palestine easily anytime soon. So are American young men and women going to be dying for this little initiative of Donald Trump's?
We should go to other countries of interest with humanitarian hearts, and there are many of them that want to do this, and build various domains that will ultimately be occupied by the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza, ending the death and destruction and, frankly, bad luck. This can be paid for by neighboring countries of great wealth. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 12. It could be numerous sites, or it could be one large site. But the people will be able to live in comfort and peace, and we'll make sure something really spectacular is done. They're going to have peace. They're not going to be shot at and killed and destroyed like this civilization of wonderful people has had to endure.
Now, it's not unlike Donald Trump to make really crazy, wild statements and then pull back in his negotiating from that position. That's called anchoring, and it's an old negotiation technique and one that Trump uses all the time. You put something crazy on the table and you settle for what you wanted in the first place that's a little bit further back from that. But this is even crazy for Donald Trump and a little bit extreme. It's also, though, about a thing called disruption, right? Making everybody just completely rethink and reset on a particular issue and start looking at more creative and different solutions and possibilities for it. It's certainly positive and visionary and consistent with the Trump view of the world. Now, Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire appeared on Piers Morgan's Uncensored and made that point a little bit more clearly.
Many people think this is for the birds. Many people think it is a form of ethnic cleansing by the purest definition of that phrase. What do you think of it? I mean, do you see good, bad and ugly here? Do you think it's got merit? What do you feel?
People can call it insane, but of course the definition of insanity is to just keep repeating the same thing and expecting different results. So say what you will about President Trump's plan, the very fact that it's different makes it probably a lot saner than the supposed peace plans we've had for almost a century now. It's clear President Trump has never seen a piece of real estate that he didn't want to acquire. And I think Greenland is a little more scenic than Gaza. But nevertheless, perhaps a golf resort or a casino would look good in that area. But I suspect you're right, Piers. I think that probably President Trump is talking past the sale here. I think he is probably giving himself a lot of leverage here in a broader kind of negotiation. But I don't want to evade the issue. You've brought up this issue of ethnic cleansing, and this is something that I've been talking about for certainly the entire duration of this war and probably even earlier, which is that in this war, you have two belligerents with the same rational strategic objective, namely the ethnic cleansing of the other. And so when we're talking about the Israelis, it does seem that the implicit and rational strategic objective would be to get the Palestinian Arabs out of Gaza because they can no longer tolerate the security risk that was proven on October 7th. I don't blame them for it. If I were the Prime Minister of Israel, I would have the same view. And we can't let the Palestinian Arabs off the hook here. They elected Hamas. Their explicit goal, their perfectly clearly stated goal is the ethnic cleansing, if not the outright genocide of Jews in Israel. So I guess my question to people who are clutching their pearls and who are scratching their heads is, what did you expect to happen? For the fact that President Trump is at least giving a little bit of leverage for a broader deal here seems to me the best resolution that we've had so far.
Two of Australia's leading Conservative commentators, Rowan Dean and Andrew Bolt, had this to say about Trump's move on Sky News Australia this week.
Gaza was basically left over after the Yom Kippur War. The Israelis didn't particularly want it, but they were left with it because they'd driven the Egyptian army back across the Sinai. They offered it to Egypt. Egypt said, no, thanks, we don't want it. They offered it to Jordan. Jordan said, no, we're not interested. So Israel was kind of left holding the baby, as it were. And as one of the most extraordinarily generous, and I must say at the time I thought foolish, gestures, Israel did what the world had been begging it to do, which was it handed across to the Palestinians land for peace. In other words, here's this beautiful piece of real estate, greenhouses, farms, abundant fertile land right on the ocean here. It's yours. You have it. There's the land. Give us the peace.
Critics of Israel have said that Israel actively has been working to prevent Gaza from developing. But Israel disengaged from Gaza back in 2005. And it can be argued that if the leadership of the Gazan people, of the Palestinian people, really wanted to see growth and achievement of their people rather than simply focus on the demise of Israel, that they could have been the ones to build the Riviera of the Middle East and gotten support from wealthy Arab neighbours to help them do that.
What did they get in return? They've had years and years of bloodshed, resulting in culminating in the most atrocious, vile, degrading atrocities that the world has seen, really, since the Second World War. The families of Jews who had given jobs to those Palestinians in Gaza as gardeners, plumbers, etc., were butchered with the very information that those people had given. So the Palestinians, in my opinion, forfeited any right to Gaza, certainly on October 7th, and if not before that, when they originally voted in Hamas, a terrorist organization, to lead them. Yeah. So the Palestinians have no rights there, no moral rights, whatever legal rights, that will be sorted out.
When is this going to end? I mean, there have been so many huge refugee groups, the Greeks and the Turks about 100 years ago, the Germans from Eastern Europe after World War II, Jews from all around the Middle East that were kicked out. They've had to resettle. This is the one group that the UN specifically protects and feeds the fantasy that they can go back to Israel one day. This would end that false hope.
You put your finger on it, Andrew, and Donald Trump's withdrawn from the UNHCR and UNRWA just before, and the World Health Organization. So the threat to the United Nations is that Donald Trump will withdraw US funding to the United Nations if they don't play ball. You watch, the United Nations will step into line. They will go along with this deal. They'll kick it up a fuss and all the rest, but they will go along with it. They will sanction it, and you will have your legal standing following that.
That was Rowan Dean and Andrew Bolt discussing Donald Trump's bold new Gaza plan on Sky News Australia this week. Donald Trump has also announced that he's going to fold the United States aid agency USAID into the State Department under Marco Rubio. Now, USAID is supposed to provide humanitarian and development aid for foreign countries and give America a bit of a soft power lever to use for positive humanitarian purposes and outcomes. But critics say that it's become a tool of the economic hitman approach and is being used by the CIA to manipulate foreign governments to make policy for US economic and political benefit. And Trump wants an end to that. Trump's also issued voluntary redundancies to everybody who works at the CIA. So watch that space in the coming weeks as the new Secretary of Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, gets her feet under the desk.
You're watching The Other Side with Damien Coorey, Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most every second Friday. In between, don't miss The Other Side Unplugged, as Damien comments on current news and conducts in-depth interviews with the people who matter whenever the need arises. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month. This is The Other Side.
By far the most controversial of Donald Trump's cabinet appointments has been his pick for Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And it's been a very strange process. The strangest bit may be one of the weirdest public displays of family division that I've ever seen. The former United States Ambassador to Australia, Caroline Kennedy, is the daughter of legendary former US President John F. Kennedy. RFK Jr. is, of course, her cousin. He's the son of Robert F. Kennedy Sr., the brother of JFK, and who, like his brother, died at the hands of an assassin's bullet in the 1960s. If you think modern American politics is wild, it was even wilder back then. JFK was president for just a couple of years before being shot and killed in 1963. And his brother Robert had been Attorney General and a senator, then decided to run to be a Democratic presidential nominee and was shot and killed while doing so in 1968. Anyway, their kids aren't too fond of each other. JFK's daughter, Caroline, only recently finished her stint as US Ambassador to Australia. And she put out that now infamous video last week calling her cousin a predator and urging the Senate committee not to confirm him. She started the video by saying she'd been asked often by people about RFK Jr.'s presidential campaign and what she thought of him.
I did not comment, not only because I was serving in a government position as United States Ambassador to Australia, but because I have never wanted to speak publicly about my family members and their challenges. We are a close generation of 28 cousins who have been through a lot together. We know how hard it's been, and we are always there for each other. But now that Bobby has been nominated by President Trump to be Secretary of Health and Human Services, a position that would put him in charge of the health of the American people, I feel an obligation to speak out.
Okay, so that's understandable and very reasonable, and she has every right to speak out. But it was the way she spoke out that shocked everyone. She started by saying that RFK Jr., Bobby, was unqualified for the role.
He lacks any relevant government, financial, management, or medical experience. His views on vaccines are dangerous and willfully misinformed.
Okay, I just want to stop it there for a sec. She emphasizes willfully. She's not saying that he is misinformed about vaccine safety, but is willfully so. He wants to be misinformed, and he wants to misinform others for his own personal gain. That is a massive criticism. She says that alone should disqualify him from the job. And then she went on an even more personal attack.
But he has personal qualities related to this job, which for me pose even greater concern. I've known Bobby my whole life. We grew up together. It's no surprise that he keeps birds of prey as pets, because Bobby himself is a predator.
Whoa. Wow. Okay. I'm trying to think of the cousin I like the least. I actually like all my cousins. I would never say anything like that publicly about any of them, even if I didn't like them. Even if I thought they were a predator and I didn't want them in an important government role. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't go out and express it that way. That is in itself predatory and a bit nutty. But it gets even worse.
I watch his younger brothers and cousins follow him down the path of drug addiction. His basement, his garage, his dorm room were always the center of the action, where drugs were available, and he enjoyed showing off how he put baby chickens and mice in a blender to feed to his hawks. It was often a perverse scene of despair and violence.
What? I mean, she is clearly trying to paint the worst possible picture of the guy. RFK's story is one of personal transformation and redemption, at least it was. Yes, he was a bad boy in his youth and he struggled with drug addiction. That was a long time ago, and people can change, Caroline.
That was a long time ago, and people can change. Through his own strength and the many second chances he was given by people who felt sorry for the boy who lost his father, Bobby was able to pull himself out of illness and disease. I admire the discipline that took and the continuing commitment it requires. But siblings and cousins who Bobby encouraged down the path of substance abuse suffered addiction, illness, and death, while Bobby has gone on to misrepresent, lie, and cheat his way through life.
Oh my God, this is absolute character assassination.
Bobby preys on the desperation of parents of sick children, vaccinating his own kids, while building a following hypocritically discouraging other parents from vaccinating theirs. Even before he fills this job, his constant denigration of our healthcare system and the conspiratorial half-truths he's told about vaccines, including in connection with Samoa's deadly 2019 outbreak of measles, have cost lives.
Okay, so the view that RFK Jr.'s views on vaccination have cost lives, that seems to be the biggest and most important criticism against him. Vaccination saves lives. That is a fact. Good vaccines, well-tested vaccines, save lives. And they do so well only if enough people take them. But they also make drug companies a truckload of money. There is a massive economic incentive to push vaccines hard. And we need a balancing force, especially after the appalling way in which the COVID vaccine was imposed by coercion and threat of loss of jobs and livelihood and liberty in Australia and other countries, which is a form of mandating, and that is simply not okay. But Caroline Kennedy took aim at RFK's position on one of the greatest Australian inventions of all time, the HPV vaccine, which prevents, among other things, cervical cancer.
Bobby is willing to profit and enrich himself by denying access to a vaccine that can prevent almost all forms of cervical cancer and has already been safely administered to millions of boys and girls. During my time in Australia, I worked on the Quad Cancer Initiative, and I learned that cervical cancer is among the top 3 forms of cancer among women in a majority of countries. Tragically, every year, more than 200,000 children lose their mothers. They are orphaned due to a lack of vaccines and screening. Those are the real-world consequences of Bobby's irresponsible beliefs.
There's no doubt that RFK Jr. has some radical beliefs about vaccines. He's been widely slammed for his endless insistence that there is some link between autism and vaccines. There have been so many studies done on that question that have repeatedly failed to find any link, but many think RFK's unwillingness to let it go means he's got other motives. This issue came up during the Senate hearings, and one Democrat senator got very emotional talking about it. Have a listen to this.
Now, some of you are new to this committee and new to the Senate, so you may not know that I am the proud mother of a 36-year-old young man with severe cerebral palsy. And a day does not go by when I don't think about what did I do when I was pregnant with him that might have caused the hydrocephalus that has so impacted his life. So please do not suggest that anybody in this body of either political party doesn't want to know what the cause of autism is. Do you know how many friends I have with children who have autism. The problem with this witness's response on the autism cause and the relationship to vaccines is because he's relitigating and churning settled science so we can't go forward and find out what the cause of autism is and treat these kids and help these families. Mr. Kennedy, that first autism study rocked my world. And like every mother, I worried about whether, in fact, the vaccine had done something to my son. And you know what? It was a tiny study of about 12 kids. And over time, the scientific community studied and studied and studied and found that it was wrong. And the journal retracted the study because sometimes science is wrong. We make progress. We build on the work and we become more successful.
That's New Hampshire Senator Maggie Hassan pointing out some of RFK's worst thinking. But he also has some good ideas about human health generally and the problems with the healthcare system in the US and globally. Given its wealth, America should be one of the healthiest countries on earth. Instead, it's one of the sickest. Terrible nutrition, processed food, obesity, they've all led to America seeing the first decline in life expectancy in generations. And that shouldn't be happening in a rich country. Something is up. The food and pharmaceutical industries are powerful and influential beyond what is in the public interest, and some balancing out is needed. One of the Republican senators who was originally thought to be going to vote against Kennedy's appointment was a man called Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. He's a doctor, and he repeatedly grilled Kennedy about his claims about vaccines and autism being linked. He decided in the end to vote for him. Explaining this, he said, quote, "I've had very intense conversations with Bobby and the White House over the weekend, and with the serious commitments that I've received from the administration and the opportunity to make progress on issues we agree on, like healthy foods and a pro-American agenda, I will vote yes." Other Republicans were more clear in their reasons for voting yes. Senator Roger Marshall is also a doctor. He responded to a Democrat senator who said that he had concerns that Bobby Kennedy would wreck the healthcare bureaucracy in America and go wild.
I hope he goes wild on food safety discussions so that we can actually improve our food safety supply. I hope he goes wild on the healthcare supply chains and, in fact, tries to make sure that drug prices go down instead of bludgeoning pharmaceutical companies, get everybody in the room and make sure that we do this right. Reduce the cost of bringing a vaccine to market, reduce the cost of bringing drugs and therapeutics to market, look at the full supply chain, and somebody with a legal mind may do that. He is no health professional. In fact, he's the first, I believe, and since I've been alive, who's not been a healthcare professional in a scientific sense. But he is a professional in terms of carrying this forward and holding people accountable through the courts. And so maybe it is time to have a different kind of disruptor there. The only way that Senator Kennedy, the only way that Bobby Kennedy and I will get crosswise is if he does actually take a position against the safety of proven vaccines. That will be a problem for me. He answered a very important question to me during the hearing. I asked him specifically if it was his intent to let the scientists of the CDC, the NIH, BARDA, and other organizations to work independently. He said to me under oath that he would. If he fails to do that, that will be a concern for me and something I'll bring up in a future oversight hearing.
US Republican Senator Roger Marshall on why he voted yes for RFK Jr. to be America's health secretary. The man who was put in charge of administering the CFMEU by the Albanese government, Mark Irving, is launching a new inquiry into violent conduct across the Queensland building industry. Mr. Irving has accused former officials within the union of permitting and getting drawn into a culture of threats, intimidation and violence as a means to get their own way and force builders into hiring CFMEU members over other workers. If you're wondering why you can't afford to buy a house in Australia, one of the reasons, not the only reason by far, but one of the reasons, is that there's not enough supply, not enough homes being built. And one of the reasons for that is the high cost of labour in this country. And one of the reasons for that is unions like the CFMEU, who instead of being what unions should be, organisations that look after workers and make sure they're getting a fair pay and conditions and safety at work, have become more like protection rackets and some kind of extortion machine, bullying builders into high wages and low productivity deals. We've had experts on this show tell us that building labour costs in this country are about 20 to 30% higher than they should be, and that for government buildings it's even higher, with taxpayers paying up to 50% more because of the cost of labour for those projects. One expert even alleged to us that this was partly because the big building companies were in on cosy deals with the unions to rip off taxpayers. Now, if that's even partly true, it's an outrage. I've been told by people in the construction industry that executives who refuse to be bullied by the CFMEU have had to get security guards to protect their families following threats. This is not okay in modern Australia, and I hope Mr. Irving gets to the bottom of it. An inquiry like this is long overdue. Not only is the union allegedly bullying builders, they like to bully inside their own ranks. He's accused former CFMEU officials of violence and threats and retaliation against rival unions and those internally who stood up to the union leadership. The Australian newspaper reports that Irving's announcement of the new inquiry comes after the resignation of barrister Travis O'Brien, the man who was appointed last year to lead the clean-up of the Queensland branch. Graham McCulloch, the former academics union leader who was appointed to take over the Victorian branch, abruptly resigned just weeks into the job in response to allegations that he acted inappropriately towards female administrative staff. And a New South Wales CFMEU organiser's car was firebombed in the early hours of Monday morning. Irving says criminal figures in the construction industry must be held to account. You're watching The Other Side, your fortnightly analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. We drop a new show every second Friday night, and join us for our new, faster and more casual show, The Other Side Unplugged, which will drop whenever there's a compelling story in the news or a great interview, an issue to discuss. So you don't miss a thing, be sure to subscribe on YouTube by clicking the subscribe button below this video and the little bell icon. That way you'll get notified when we post any new stuff. But more importantly, we really need you to help our mission. So if you can spare $5 or $10 or $20 a month and you want to get behind what we're doing at The Other Side so we can do more of it, please head over to othersidetv.com.au and sign up to the exclusive side and support us for less than $1 a week. We really do need your support. That's othersidetv.com.au. And even if you can't afford to support us financially, you can also sign up there for free, and we can then still keep in touch if the misinformation and e-safety police come after us. othersidetv.com.au, our new website. Check it out. One of the clearest recent examples of the terribly left-wing biased state of our universities in Australia at the moment was the incident that happened late last month at the Queensland University of Technology, in which a speaker at a conference presented this revolting slide. You've probably all seen this one going around in social media in the past couple of weeks. But in case you missed it, it reads Dutton's Jew, and then proceeds to outline the characteristics of a right-wing Jewish person. The first line reads, promotes judeo-christian values, and it puts the term judeo-christian in quotation marks, as if it's something just made up. It isn't. Judeo-Christian values are steeped in history and in a little book you might have heard of called The Bible. Coming from today's culture of leftist insanity, the values in the Bible may seem extreme conservative and far right-wing, and yeah, there are other religions and other civilized philosophies that evolved throughout history, but ours in Australia evolved from Western Europe, and it is predominantly Christian and Jewish in origin. That is Judeo-Christian. Okay, the next point is equally hilarious. Hates the, quote, radical left and uses the cute lefty quotation marks for mockery in the same hilarious way. These poor fools think their worldview is somehow normal and that the idea of a radical left is something we made up. I wish you were made up, but you're sadly all too real. And you seem to have all the university funding at the moment. So anyhow, the next one is scared of protesters. Okay, well, we don't like lunatic mobs running in the streets, if that's what you mean, and we don't like violence. Peaceful protesters are okay, but yeah, I'm scared of mobs of angry-looking people marching in large volumes through my streets shouting slogans about how the only democracy in the Middle East should absolutely cease to exist. Yep. I'd say that's a rational fear more than an irrational phobia, wouldn't you? Okay, the next one, hates Palestinians, Arabs and Muslims and is anti-immigrant and thinks of anti-Semitism as the only form of racism. I think hates is, again, a bit of a strong word to use here. Maybe is a little wary of, might be a more accurate way of putting it. I don't see many racists in Australia, actually. I see a country all too willing to welcome people from other cultures and give them a go, provided they assimilate and integrate a bit. But apparently expecting even a little integration is hate to the radical left. But then we shouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't be a left-wing slide if it didn't call someone a racist somewhere. And finally, at the bottom here, the worst possible slur you could attack anyone with. This one's a real doozy. The last point on the slide, defender of Western civilization and Australian culture. Oh no, good God, we can't have that. If we have that, we might have a functional society. Defending Western civilization and Australian culture, whoa, that is an outrage. Okay, so I think we can all agree that that slide is patronising in the extreme. Not to Jewish people, but to the political centre-right and right, full of the typical lowbrow left-wing thinking you might expect of a first-year social science undergraduate who's discovered Marxism for the first time and naively thinks that it's the answer to all mankind's ills. So let's just understand more clearly what happened here, because there's a bit more to it that the mainstream media have left out of the story. The event was called QUT's National Symposium on Unifying Anti-Racist Research and Action. Sounds kind of nice, but remember, anti-racism is a thing now. It's a specified field of research and thinking that focuses on critical race theory ideas, which are inherently left-wing and all about classical Marxist ideas like that wherever there's power or wealth inequality in the world, there's oppression. That hierarchies of power and authority and wealth are only there because someone ate all the pies or took something from someone. It could never be that someone actually has more power or wealth because they have taken on more responsibility or more risk or worked harder. But anyway, I'm going off track a bit. The QUT has this symposium of lefties in January. The publicity material said it was a call to action in the lead up to Invasion Day to strategize a coordinated anti-racism agenda. So it ain't no politically balanced academic event. Speakers included Green Senator Lydia Thorpe and the Macquarie University academic Dr. Randa Abdel Fattah, who's brilliant but tends to leave out the bad bits about Hamas whenever she's talking about how oppressed the Palestinian people are by Israel.
What we are up against is not just Israel versus Palestinians. It's an attempt to maintain the supremacy of a Western colonial order, which will always and has always represented the brown and black, colonized other as emotional, as unreasonable, as unrestrained, as bestial, as barbaric and uncivilized.
Yeah, the colonizers never tried to lift anyone up out of poverty or never advanced cultures and enabled their survival or progress, just always horrible, oppressive racists. Honestly, that narrative has got to shift before we're going to be able to have any kind of civilized debate about the future between right and left. Until we can all say some instead of always, and until we can separate the past from the present. So that's Dr. Randa Abdel Fattah, the woman who told Sky News that she doesn't see Hamas as a terrorist organisation. Well, why would she? In her wacky worldview, they're freedom fighters. And Jewish people have no claim to any part of the Middle East at all. Anyway, this is Australia. You're allowed a different point of view, even if it's obviously wrong. But a symposium that carries the name of one of Australia's best universities in its title should really have some speakers from the other side of the argument too. Because in their own defence, the symposium organisers said that slide that we just looked at came from a pre-symposium comedy event where they were just mocking and having a good old laugh about some of the ways in which racism manifests in our society. Actually, it was just mocking and blatantly insulting ordinary centre-right Aussies, so like most of the audience of this show, and that annoys me a bit. But here's the real kicker. That slide came during a presentation from the leader of the most left-wing Jewish organisation in the country. So they had a Jewish person there, but it was Sarah Schwartz, who leads the controversial left-wing Jewish Council of Australia, speaking about Dutton's Jew. She told the Australian newspaper that she was referring to the way that Peter Dutton conceives of Jewish people. Yeah, it was a bit more insulting than that, Sarah. And uses us as a political footballs to push his own agenda, she said. No, Mr. Dutton is simply reflecting the views of most centre-right Jewish people and most Australians who think that Israel does have a right to exist and Hamas aren't freedom fighters but terrorists. We're not all just bigoted, angry white men looking for an excuse to let out our inner racism. There are a few neo-Nazis who fall into that category, but 99% of Australians are just normal people who think that if you want to get on with your fellow humans, it's best to not say you want them wiped off the map every few seconds and then launch an attack as obscene as October 7. Anyway, the QUT has this week announced an inquiry into that symposium. They've appointed a former federal court judge, John Middleton, to conduct an independent review. QUT Vice-Chancellor Margaret Shields says the findings of that inquiry will be released publicly. It's a good move, but how about we look at the deeper issue here? The outrageous level of left-wing ideology that's infiltrated not just QUT and Macquarie, but every university in Australia. Sure, uni should be a place where radical ideas exist. They should be thrashed and sorted out. But letting one ideology, and a really awful one at that, dominate all others to the point that anyone who doesn't subscribe to it can't even get a job at a university in this country to teach, or if they do, gets their career heavily slowed down by that left-wing machine, that is the real problem we face. Our institutions of higher learning suck up hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money every year, and they have huge influence over our kids' minds. Aussies deserve much better than what they're getting. And we need a complete and total reform of the whole stinking pile of cultural poison that our universities have sadly become. You may have noticed if you've been overseas on holiday recently that you can log into your streaming services like Netflix or Prime in other countries, but the shows they offer are different and sometimes even better. You're paying good money for those subscription services. Why can't you watch? Well, with a virtual private network, or VPN, you can log in from home here in Australia with an internet address from anywhere in the world, and big corporations and big government can't see where you are. Now, to be clear, criminals can still be actively found with police warrants, of course, but the average honest citizen will have their location protected from prying eyes of corporate marketers and government bureaucrats. If you sign up now with private internet access, we think they are the best VPN service out there. That's private internet access. As a viewer of The Other Side, you can get 83% off the price of your subscription and get online for less than $3 a month. Check it out right now. Go to piavpn.com/otherside. That's piavpn.com/otherside. It's a great service and a rock bottom price, and you're helping keep The Other Side going and growing.
The Other Side with Damien Coorey is Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed and diving deep on the issues that matter most in around an hour, with a new episode dropping every second Friday. As we enter our 5th year, we're going to be bringing you more content via our YouTube and X channels at Other Side Oz with The Other Side Unplugged. Damien will drop comments on the news whenever something important happens, and in-depth interviews with people who have real insight and value to add. More content when it matters, but only when it matters, so you don't miss a thing. Subscribe now to our YouTube channel at Other Side Oz by clicking the button and the bell below the picture frame, and follow us on X now at Other Side Oz. That's AUS at Other Side Oz. It's free. This is The Other Side.
So we just heard in an earlier story in this Fortnight show how left-wing academics make fun of the term judeo-christian values, as if there's no such thing. Apparently the term was just made up by right-wingers to alienate anyone who isn't Christian or Jewish. Well, the Jewish conservative commentator Dennis Prager, the American talk radio host and founder of the online information channel PragerU, put out a really good video about a year ago to clear up this myth that Judeo-Christian values aren't really a thing.
Judeo-Christian values are the moral foundation of Western civilization. As the great British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher put it, the truths of the Judeo-Christian tradition are infinitely precious, not only because they are true, but also because they provide the moral impulse which alone can lead to that peace for which we all long. Mrs. Thatcher was a believing Christian. I am a believing Jew. While we have different theologies, we have the same core values. And as far as society is concerned, moral values are far more important than theologies.
Dennis Prager then goes on to outline 10 of these shared values. Number 1 is that Jews and Christians believe in one God, the God of the Old Testament of the Bible. But whatever your concept of God is, it's the moral ideas that leads to that really matter.
Number 2, the Hebrew Bible introduced the most revolutionary moral idea in history, that there are objective moral truths, just as there are objective mathematical and scientific truths. Without God, there is no moral truth, only moral opinions. Number 3, because there are moral truths, good and evil are the same for all people. Number 4, God, not man, not government, not popular opinion, not a democratic vote, is the source of our rights. The American Declaration of Independence declares that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights.
In terms of ideas that have become unpopular in our modern culture, the idea that man isn't essentially good is one of them. Pop psychology and New Age ideas insist that emotions like shame and guilt and generally feeling bad about yourself sometimes are all things to be shunned. Modern academia laughs at the idea of a conscience and even the concept of good character. Manners and polite social behavior, modesty, all of those sorts of things put down as just airs and graces of some elite class. Well, the Judeo-Christian ethic is built on the idea that the world isn't heaven, precisely because man has fallen and has to redeem himself. Improvement, humility, and work is needed. And that is what we're here for.
Number 7, man is not basically good. Christians speak of original sin in referring to man's nature. Jews cite what God said in Genesis, the will of man's heart is evil from his youth. Both beliefs are diametrically opposed to the naive modern belief that man is basically good. And they lead to the same conclusion. We need God-based rules to keep us from our natural inclinations. Number 8, therefore, our natural inclinations are a very poor moral guide. As religious Jews and Christians put it, don't follow your heart. A lot of terrible things have been done and are being done now by people thinking their hearts are better guides than Judeo-Christian values.
And finally, there's the basic list of rules of life that underpin Judeo-Christian values, the 10 Commandments.
They are the core of Judeo-Christian values. In fact, if everyone lived just by the 10 Commandments, we wouldn't need armies or even police. There's another important aspect to the term Judeo-Christian. The two religions need each other. Without the Old Testament, there is no New Testament. Virtually every Christian moral principle derives from the Hebrew Bible. Not only the 10 Judeo-Christian values I just enumerated, but such basic moral principles as love your neighbor as yourself, love the Lord your God, and love the stranger. At the same time, Jews need Christians. It was overwhelmingly Christians who carried knowledge of the Hebrew Bible to the world.
Now, the point is, it doesn't matter whether or not you believe in Judeo-Christian values or not. The point is that they are a thing. The link between Jewish and Christian thought and philosophy is not a right-wing construct to promote conservative values, nor is it something just made up recently to win US support for Israel. It's actually real.
The ultimate embodiment of Judeo-Christian values has been the United States of America. America's founders were Christians, some culturally, some theologically, who were rooted in the Old Testament. So much so that Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin designed a seal for the United States that depicted God leading Israel out of Egypt, just as they believed God was leading America out of Europe. Only if we keep these values will we keep America, and for that matter, Western civilization.
That's Dennis Prager helping us understand Judeo-Christian values.
The Other Side is Australia's best completely independent news commentary YouTube channel, bringing you up to speed and diving deep on the issues that matter most. Our fortnightly news catch-up and deep dive show, The Other Side with Damien Coorey, drops every second Friday night. And our new random The Other Side Unplugged content will appear whenever we have high-quality, meaningful content that matters to bring you. To keep producing and growing, we rely on support from ordinary viewers like you who care about the quality of news and commentary in Australia. The best way to support us is by becoming a member of the exclusive side on our website and contributing a small amount each month to the cause. You can do so for less than $5 a month, and we'll drop you an email when we post new content so you never miss a thing. Check out our website at othersidetv.com.au. That's othersidetv.com.au, or scan the QR code on your screen now with your phone camera. This is The Other Side.
And that is all for this episode of The Other Side, your analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. Our main show is now fortnightly, so we'll catch you again Friday week on February 21. In the meantime, catch our new show, The Other Side Unplugged, and remember to subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss any content. It's free, and most importantly, please remember to tell your friends about the show. Also, please follow us on X, and we're now back on TikTok too. And watch out for our new shorts on YouTube also. Smash the like, subscribe, and every other button on all the platforms that you can. And if you are watching on YouTube and if you like what we're doing and you want to support us, pop on over to our new website at othersidetv.com.au and sign up to the exclusive side for less than $5 a month, or just sign up for free so we can keep in touch. I'm Damien Curry. Have a great fortnight. We'll see you on The Other Side Unplugged. Bye for now.
The Other Side with Damien Curry is Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most every second Friday. In between, don't miss The Other Side Unplugged, as Damien comments on current news and conducts in-depth interviews with the people who matter whenever the need arises. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month.